They locked every door on the station that morning. I remember the sound most of all, the heavy clunk of seals falling into place, one after another, moving down the corridor like a slow wave. I was carrying a tray of translation chips to the medical bay when I heard it, and I stopped in the hallway and counted them. 7 doors, 7 locks, all of them leading to the same place, the dueling chamber. I had been on Kestrel Station for almost a year by then, working as a translator for the Human Liaison Office. My job was small and quiet. I helped visiting crews understand local customs, filled out paperwork nobody wanted to read, and stayed out of anything that looked like alien politics. That was the rule everyone gave me when I arrived. Stay out of it. Let them handle their own affairs. Humans are guests here, not judges. I had followed that rule for 11 months. But that morning, something felt wrong before I even knew what was happening. I asked one of the station clerks, a small furred man named Ovrick who always traded me gossip for real Earth coffee, what was going on. He looked around before he answered, the way people do when they are about to say something they are not supposed to say. Duel, he whispered. House Seath and House Marrow. Old blood debt. They are settling it the traditional way. A fight? A duel, he corrected, like the word mattered. Sanctioned. Legal. Old as the council itself. And the doors? Sealed so no one can interfere. It has happened before. Outsiders trying to stop a duel, and it turning into something worse. A small fight becoming a war. So now, once the seals are set, nobody goes in, and nobody goes out until it is finished. I nodded, like that made sense to me, and I let him go back to his post. But I could not stop thinking about the way he said, settling it. Like it was simple. Like 2 people were just going to solve a disagreement and then everyone would go home. I did not know either of the duelists personally, but I had seen Rel Marrow in the market twice, a young noblewoman with pale blue markings across her jaw, always polite, always careful with her words, in a way that made me think she had learned caution the hard way. And I had heard of Doran Saith, older, respected, from a house that had been powerful for longer than most Earth nations had existed. It was none of my business. I told myself that 3 times as I finished my delivery route. Then I heard something that changed things. I was walking past the private lounge where the House Seath attendants waited, and the door was cracked open. I did not mean to listen, but I heard 2 voices speaking low and fast in a dialect I happened to know well, because I had spent 6 months translating trade agreements for exactly that region. The blade is set, one voice said. She will not know until it is too late. And if someone checks it beforehand? No one checks. It is tradition. The weapons are blessed, not inspected. Doran will win before she understands what happened. I stood very still in that hallway for a long moment. My chest felt tight. I did not know exactly what "the blade is set" meant, but I understood enough. Something about the weapon Rel Marrow was going to use was not right, and no one was going to check, because tradition said nobody had to. I thought about walking away. That was the safe thing to do. I was not a noble. I was not even a citizen of this system. I was a translator with a tray of chips still in my hands, and this was exactly the kind of interference I had been warned against for 11 months straight. But I kept thinking about Rel in the market, careful with her words, polite to a translator nobody else bothered to notice. I put the tray down on a bench, and I walked toward the dueling chamber. The first sealed door stopped me exactly the way it was supposed to. It was a heavy panel of dark metal, with a glowing lock built into the local council network, the kind of lock that only responds to authorized station personnel. I was not authorized. I had never been authorized for anything like this. But I remembered something small, something almost silly. 8 months ago, I had helped install a translation relay near this very door, back when the chamber was being used for something ordinary, a trade dispute hearing. My identification had been added to the access list for maintenance purposes, and never removed. Nobody thought to remove it, because nobody thought a human translator would ever need to walk through a sealed dueling chamber door. I placed my hand against the panel. It read my signature and clicked open. I stepped through. The next 6 doors were the same story, over and over. Each one sealed against nobles, against guards, against anyone who mattered in the eyes of council law, and each one blind to a small, forgotten human clearance that had never been important enough to cancel. By the time I reached the final door, my hands were shaking, but I did not stop. The chamber itself was larger than I expected, round, with high windows letting in pale light. Rel Marrow stood on one side, dressed in a simple ceremonial garment, holding a long curved blade with both hands. Doran Saith stood across from her, calm, composed, a faint and terrible confidence in the set of his shoulders. Around the edges of the room stood the council witnesses, maybe a dozen of them, all still, all silent, all watching the ritual unfold exactly the way it had unfolded for centuries. Nobody was looking at the door. Nobody expected anyone to come through it. So when it slid open and I walked in, every head in the room turned at once. For a moment, nobody said anything. I think they were too shocked to speak. A human, plain and unremarkable, standing where only nobles and witnesses were allowed, inside a chamber sealed by 7 separate locks. Then the eldest of the council witnesses, a tall woman with silver markings down her arms, found her voice. "This chamber is sealed," she said, her tone somewhere between disbelief and anger. "How did you enter?" "The door let me in," I said, because it was true, and because I did not know how else to explain it. "This is a sanctioned duel," she continued. "You have no standing here. Leave immediately, before your presence is considered a violation." I looked at Rel. She was watching me with an expression I could not quite read, surprise maybe, or something closer to hope, though I am sure she would not have called it that. "I will leave," I said, "but first, someone needs to check the blade." The room went very still. Doran Saith spoke for the first time, his voice smooth and unbothered. "The weapons are blessed before the ceremony. They do not require inspection. This is tradition." "I understand that," I said, and I made myself keep my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding hard enough that I was sure everyone could hear it. "But I overheard 2 of your attendants this morning. They said the blade was set so that Rel would not know until it was too late. I do not know what that means exactly, but I know it does not sound like something that should happen inside a fair duel." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the eldest witness turned slowly toward Doran. "Explain this." "She is a translator," Doran said, and I noticed, for the first time, a small crack in his calm. "She misunderstood something. Humans often misunderstand our customs." "I know exactly what I heard," I said. "I have spent a year translating your language for trade agreements. I did not misunderstand." The eldest witness held up a hand, silencing both of us. She turned to one of the other council members and spoke a single word in a dialect I did not recognize. That member walked forward, slow and formal, and lifted Rel's blade from her hands. I watched as they examined it, turning it carefully under the pale light from the high windows. The room was silent except for the small sound of metal catching the light. Then the examiner spoke, and though I could not understand every word, I understood the tone. Something was wrong with the blade, something that should not have been there. The eldest witness turned back to Doran Saith, and her voice, when it came, was colder than anything I had heard since arriving on the station. "You would have won through deception," she said, "not through honor. This duel is void. Our Saith's claim is void with it." Doran did not answer. He simply stood there, his calm finally gone, his shoulders tight with something between anger and shame. Rel Marrow lowered the empty space where the blade had been in her hands, and looked at me across the chamber. She did not smile, not exactly, but something in her face eased, like a held breath finally let go. "Why did you come?" she asked quietly, the first words she had spoken since I entered. I did not have a clever answer. I only had the true one. "Because it was not fair," I said, "and because I could get through the door." The eldest witness studied me for a long moment after that. I expected anger. I expected to be escorted out and reported to my liaison office, maybe sent home in disgrace for interfering in something that was never meant to include me. Instead, she said something I did not expect at all. "Our laws seal these doors against those who might use force to interfere. Guards, rival houses, armed intruders." She paused, and something almost like understanding crossed her face. "We never accounted for someone who would simply walk in and speak the truth." "I did not mean to break any laws," I said. "You did not," she answered. "You walked through a door that was never sealed against you, because no one imagined a translator would need stopping. Perhaps that says more about our traditions than it does about you." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing at all. The council took over from there. I was asked to give a formal account of what I had overheard, which I did, as plainly and honestly as I could. House Caith's claim was stripped, and some kind of formal inquiry was opened into how the blade had been tampered with. I did not fully understand the politics of it, and I did not try to. That part was not mine to solve. When it was finally over, I walked back out through the 7 doors, one after another, the same way I had come in. Each lock read my old, forgotten clearance, and let me pass without question, the same as before. It struck me, walking through them, how strange it was that something so small, an identification badge nobody bothered to remove, had ended up mattering more than every ancient tradition in that chamber. Rel found me later that evening, near the Human Liaison office, where I was trying to explain to my supervisor why I had left my tray of translation chips sitting on a bench in a public corridor. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said, "not in front of the council, just as myself." "You do not have to," I said. "I only did what seemed right." "That is exactly why I wanted to thank you," she said. "Everyone else in that room was bound by centuries of custom. You were not. You saw only what was true and what was fair, and you acted on it, without needing permission from tradition to do so." I did not know how to answer that either, so I simply nodded, and she left with a small bow that I was fairly sure was more respect than any human translator on this station had ever received. I think about that morning often now, about the sound of 7 doors sealing shut, one after another, meant to keep out anyone who might cause harm, and about how none of those locks were ever meant to stop someone who only wanted to speak the truth out loud. They locked every door to stop the fight. They forgot to lock it against someone they never thought to fear,